Live again. Welcome in everybody to another Friday afternoon AMA live stream. Third week now with the amazing John Paulsen. John, how's it going, man? How'd week one treat you? How was last night?
Everything's been okay. There's a subsection of fantasy football managers who panic if the players they drafted or that I told them to draft don't immediately do great. I deal with it every year. I'll just say that I have a process, and the process has worked for me and led to 8 top 5 finishes in the last 12 years that I guess it was 10 years that we participated in the accuracy contest. And I don't panic if things don't go wonderfully from the get-go. They did go very wonderfully for Aaron Jones, who was one of our primary targets, and he did pill up with a hamstring injury. So we're hoping he can play this week.
Yeah. So you're not concerned that you drafted a bunch of T. Higgins and he put up 0?
No, I mean, if it's a rookie and that's his first game and he's playing 30% of the snaps, then now you're starting to get worried. But it's a T. Higgins track record. He's gonna bounce back, regress to the mean, and get you what you wanted from him eventually. It's just sometimes it's tough starts, bad matchups, good defenses. Alexander Madison's running into that right now. He was the RB18 week 1, which was fine in a bad matchup against the Bucks, and he had another bad matchup last night against the Eagles, who held Ramondre Stevenson down in the running game. Ramondre kind of got there in week 1 with the 6 receptions, but so Madison got some disgruntled Madison managers in my feed, but stay the course. The schedule is going to get better. That offensive line will maybe get a little healthier, and he'll start to produce for you.
Yeah, the schedule opens up pretty nicely in the next couple weeks or so for him, so he should be all right. And kind of a quick transition. We'll get to all the comments before this, but how do you feel about AJ Brown? The Eagles' offense looked kind of meh last night, and I guess he didn't really do all that much the week before either. Of course, Devonta Smith had the big 60-yard touchdown. But this is directly asked to you about how do you feel about AJ Brown?
He's a great talent. They changed offensive coordinators. Might take a few weeks to sort of iron things out. We did see Devonta with the huge game, so it's not like the passing game is completely broken. And the Vikings, I think maybe their defense is going to be a little bit better with Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator. They kind of held their own for a while, and at least were limiting the Eagles' big plays. They were basically daring them to run, which is why you see 23 pass attempts for Jalen Hurts, 48 rushing attempts. That's not going to happen every week.
Yeah, I'm not all that worried about AJ Brown, and of course, he looked like he was a little upset about something on the sideline, so maybe a little squeaky wheel narrative here coming up pretty soon. But now, at the end of the day, it's still AJ Brown, and I'm not worried about it yet. Still, and hopefully, with the way their schedule pans out over the next couple weeks, I mean, that was one of the things that we talked about before the season, was that their schedule is a lot more difficult this season than it was last year. So there may be a little bit more of that on top of the offensive coordinator change, like you mentioned. The whole team just needs time to adjust to new coordinators and offenses and a new year. So we can go back up to the top. Legend of Krakatoa asked, by the way that the Browns use David Njoku, do you still think that he can be a top tight end in fantasy? So Njoku last week played 73% of snaps, only had 3 targets though, 2 receptions, 24 yards. I mean, it wasn't a fantastic game just in general with Cleveland and Cincinnati. But how do you feel about David Njoku moving forward? Are you concerned about the usage? Do you still think that he could be an every week kind of guy, or are you putting him down more into the more streaming kind of category? You're more willing to sit him.
He ran 24 routes on looks like 35 Deshaun Watson dropbacks. So that was 3rd on the team. It was actually more than Amari Cooper, but I think Amari missed a few snaps with a injury or something, got knocked out of the game for a little bit and came back behind Elijah Moore and Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's still pretty good usage. in terms of routes. I don't think I have any Njoku. I just was questioning this Cleveland passing attack in general. Deshaun Watson did get there with 40-something yards rushing and a touchdown, but he was passing the ball really bad last year, and I wasn't convinced that he was just going to bounce back and do really well. He didn't really look that great as a passer last week. Kind of a ugly divisional game against Cincy. They didn't really need to throw the ball. So we'll see. I mean, I think, if you start to see Deshaun dropping dimes again, like he did a few years ago, then I think it's more confidence for Njoku because he'll be part of a better passing attack. But right now you've got Amari Cooper as the number one, probably Elijah Moore as the number two option in the passing game. And then Njoku, at best is probably three. And this is a pretty run centric Nick Chubb offense anyway. So he's kind of a, fringe RB or fringe tight end one, high end tight end two. I think he's, obviously really athletic, talented, but it's just sort of role in offense right now.
Yeah. I don't really know what else to make about David Njoku and stuff. Again, I feel like this is going to be the theme of today's show is not overreacting to week one. It's still only 1 week. We could look back at the end of the season and be like, man, that was one of his worst games that he had all year. But if you stuck with him, he could end up still being good. I'm still willing to start him over the next couple of weeks just to see what happens. But if this pattern continues, by the end of September and he's not averaging more than 3-4 targets a game, then we have something I think that we kind of have to be concerned about, whether or not he can still be an every week kind of starter. Jeff, though, tossed us a $5 super chat. Jeff, thank you so much for the support. To everybody else out there, super chats, we basically stop what we're doing. Not stop what we're doing. We finish answering the question that we were on, to the thought that we had. But then we go directly to super chat. So if you want an immediate answer, super chats are the best way to do that. They're by no means required, though. We will get to as many questions as we can. But we do go directly to those, and we appreciate all of the support from these. So Jeff is asking that he has Tutu Atwell on his waiver wire. Would you drop Marvin Mims to pick him up in a half PPR, or is Mims still a better stash long term? I think I'm dropping Mims.
Yeah, the Mims situation was a little surprising, right? I think we kind of went into that game thinking, he had a lot of buzz at camp. And then Jerry Jeudy's out. So you're assuming he's going to play, at worst, run the third most routes, perhaps amongst the receiving core. But he was behind Sutton with 36, little Jordan Humphrey with 28, Brandon Johnson with 24, and Marvin Mims comes in at 13, 8 ahead of Philip Dorsett, who was just elevated from the practice squad. So was little Jordan Humphrey. So we're seeing some shenanigans. Looks like Sean Payton is going with his guys that he knew from New Orleans, Humphrey in this case, over the rookie. I think long-term he should be okay, but this is not conducive to September, October production, especially with Jerry Jeudy coming back, it looks like this week.
Right. I'd be willing to drop Marvin Mims for Tutu Atwell. It's exactly like what you said. The usage was not there. He is still a rookie. Jerry Jeudy is coming back. This is just not a player that I want to have on my roster waiting until like week 10 or 11 before the breakout eventually happens. Like, I want players that are usable now. It's very likely that you could drop Mims now, pick him up in week 6 or 7 after, Cooper Kupp comes back. Then you can drop Tutu once, his role gets kind of relegated back down when Kupp is back. But with Kupp out, it's Puka and it's Tutu. And I think that they're both going to be good options to have. Maybe you don't have to start them every single week. Like, I don't think I'm confident throwing Tutu out there this week against the Niners. But I think that he's still a better end of bench player to stash now than Marvin Mims for the next however many weeks the Cooper Kupp is out. So thank you for the super chat, Jeff. Hopefully that.
By the way, I think Jeff was the one yesterday that said that I'm not giving up on my hair. I still got some hair up the top here. I do shave it weekly, but I do have a little bit of hair up top. I'm not giving up on it yet.
Don't give up. Don't give up.
Never give up.
It's like Alexander Madison. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
All right, let's run through. We got some Dynasty questions in here too. AJ says, "Happy Friday. Let's talk Puka. Who's trading me a first for him?" I saw a couple Dynasty League trades where Puka was traded for first. I talked about it yesterday on the video, in the trade show video with Russ. There was one for Puka and a second for a first, and another was just Puka for a first straight up. Both of which I think are pretty insane. If you're able to get that kind of value for Puka right now, go ahead and do it. And then do what AJ says, hit that thumbs up, hit that like button. Let us know that you love this kind of content and hopefully help spread it to other people on the YouTubes. Anthony, Mac Jones, and Terrace Marshall for a late 2024 first in a 12-team half PPR Superflex. I'm definitely taking that first round pick. Even in a Superflex league, I just think that you just have so much more upside with the pick than you do with Mac Jones and Terrace Marshall. Do you love Mac Jones? I know Daigle was pretty high on him, but he liked him as a late round best ball, like your QB3, QB4 kind of guy.
I would not say I loved or love Mac Jones, but it does. I mean, there is the argument that now they actually have an offensive coordinator who knows how to call an offense and run an offense, and that's a big upgrade for the entire squad.
Yeah, absolutely. I would still take the first though. More people in your league are going to want a first than they will Mac Jones. So I will take the first. Andrew says, "What's up? Thoughts on this offer in a 12-team PPR Superflex? Start 14. He's giving up. I'm assuming that's Deshaun Watson because you're getting Burrow. Giving up Deshaun Watson, Chris Olave, and Treylon Burks, and you're getting back Joe Burrow, Tyreek Hill, Antonio Gibson. Appreciate the advice. Love the content. Thank you, Andrew. So this is a really interesting trade. So obviously you're bumping up in. You're getting an upgrade at the quarterback position, both this year and for Dynasty. You're bumping up at the wide receiver position for production, but you're losing the Dynasty value going from Olave to Tyreek because Olave is like 7 years younger than Tyreek. But obviously you get the production of Tyreek. And then Burks and Gibson, I feel like, are just kind of upside guys at each of their positions. In a Superflex league, I'd be willing to do this because I want the better quarterback, and you're getting the production of Tyreek Hill now. It kind of sucks, though, that you're losing Olave. But I would be willing to do this just for the upside to go get Joe Burrow, not have to deal with the Deshaun Watson stuff. If he's good, if he's not good, we still don't know right now. Joe Burrow is good. Joe Burrow is elite. Give me the better quarterback, and I'll figure out the other stuff later with the wide receiver and running backs out of this. Anything different on your end, John?
Yeah, this is Dynasty Superflex?
Yes.
So giving up on Olave, but getting Tyreek, who's probably still has 3 or 4 or 5 years of elite type play. And then you're upgrading from Watson to Burrow. That seems smart, especially if you're contending.
Yeah, that's the way I'm going. So love it. Grimly in here is asking, this week, are you starting one of Raheem Mostert, Brian Robinson, and Gabe Davis? So Mostert gets, I don't remember who Miami plays now off the rip. Brian Robinson plays Denver, I believe. I'm not good with matchups again this week. Gabe Davis, also don't remember whose matchup is. Jeez, this is a terrible morning. Terrible.
Well, you're a little sick. We should probably let the listeners know you're a little under the weather. You're doing the best you can. Mostert is up against the Patriots, I believe. And do you have a feeling on this as I look up my rankings?
Yeah, I was trying to look through because I was trying to remember who they play this week. But I feel like my gut answer on this is still Brian Robinson. I mean, he didn't get 40 touches like we thought that he would last week, but it still ended up, I think, being a positive day because he ended up scoring. But I would probably still be going back to the Brian Robinson well. Mostert would be a close second, though, and I could probably be persuaded to go with Raheem Mostert. Gabe Davis at this point, I'm not trusting him to into my lineup unless you need like a home run swing. You're projected to lose by like 20, and you're just hoping that Gabe Davis has one of his 2 touchdown games. Probably the only scenario where I would play Gabe Davis.
Well, I will say that Buffalo has Vegas. It's a good matchup, but I believe Vegas played a lot of zone. That's where Gabe Davis thrives, so he's actually fairly high on Gabe Davis.
There you go.
I don't know if this is PPR or half PPR. I have my half PPR rankings pulled up. Mostert and Robinson are really close. Mostert has that little knee issue. Didn't have a huge volume of touches. I think Robinson is like, it's weird where I rank him because his floor seems rock solid. Like he's going to see his 15 plus carries. Now he's getting used as a receiver. Antonio Gibson fumbled last week and basically got benched in his backup role for Chris Rodriguez. And I say that as a question because I didn't know who Chris Rodriguez was.
He's a rookie out of Kentucky, I believe.
I'm not like in tune with the Debbie, the kind of fringe rookies or whatever, but he's so they don't like and they don't trust Antonio Gibson. I think Antonio Gibson is a good player, but I think what's coming out of this now is that Robinson's just going to play a lot of snaps. And you said he was going to have 40 touches last week, or 50 or 60 or whatever.
It climbed every time we talked about it.
Yeah, he ended up with I think 19 carries.
He had 20 touches, 19 carries. Then he got one extra reception,
and that was a really
that reception.
That was a cool play where Sam Howell rolled to his left and sort of dodged the defense and kind of slid a pass past him to Brian Robinson, who was running a route and took it in. So cool that he was in there in a passing down inside the red zone. That kind of shows where the Commanders are kind of going with him. So I think he's got the highest floor. Mostert has maybe some ceiling because he's got that 4.3 speed. But I think I like Robinson, especially in half PPR.
Is A-Chain back this week? Did I see something about A-Chain's injury?
Good question. I don't know. I can look that up.
He was a full participant in practice yesterday, A-Chain.
He might get a handful. Yeah, they might try to force feed him like 3 or 4 touches to get his feet wet. But he's been really down the depth chart in camp. But we know he has a lot of upside.
Mm-hmm. All right. Joe said real quick, someone dropped Drake London and Gabe Davis. Which one should he grab for rest of season? I'd still grab Drake London.
Yeah, I think talent-wise, route running wise, we know from Matt Harmon's work at Reception Perception that Drake London is the real deal. He has environmental issues, clearly, based on last week. I think heading into this season, I was expecting London's snap shares to continue, which they did, but Pitts was basically a part-time player in the preseason, and I thought that would continue based on what Arthur Smith did with Pitts last year, but then now Pitts is basically a full-time player. That's sort of this passing attack can't support more than one trustworthy pass catcher.
I was going to say,
maybe not even
support one.
Can it even support one?
It'll support Bijan's target share.
And this is what we mentioned on the pod yesterday. Was that, or was it? Yeah, yesterday. That Tyler Allgeier's involvement is pushing Bijan into more of a pass catching role, and that's affecting London or it did in week 1. It's affecting London and Pitts actually got a few catches, whereas London had 1 target and a goose egg. So I don't think that this week's going to necessarily be better against the Packers with Jair Alexander possibly shadowing them. But London definitely is the better talent here. Gabe Davis plays in a much, much better passing attack and with a better quarterback, clearly. So it's sort of which cons do you want to live with? Which pros do you want on your squad?
Could you galaxy brain this and say, because you just said that Gabe Davis has a really good matchup. He gets Vegas this week. Could you galaxy brain this by picking up Gabe Davis, see if he has a good week, and then try to trade him? And then if nobody picks up Drake London, and again, he has another bad week this week with Jair shadowing him and shutting him down, that he could still be on waivers next week, even if somebody picks him up now and he has another goose egg. I don't know. Is that too galaxy brained?
That's a lot. I mean, I think, Joe's thinking about picking up London. I'm sure the other 10 owners that didn't cut him are thinking about it as well. And you just, it's 1 week. I don't know that I would risk it with the talent disparity here. It may not pay off. I mean, this Atlanta offense might continue to do what it's been, what it did in week 1.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that they're going to be like in a front running game script really consistently this year. I mean, they're going to have to throw the ball more than what they would probably like to, unless they are able to.
Does that matter?
Be ahead. I mean, like London produced late last year with Ritter, And I sort of thought that would continue and that he's that good. I think the issue is like, okay, if you pick up Gabe Davis, he does well or has a good week. Is London still available for you? And then you're now maybe picked up the guy that you didn't really want. You know what I mean? Like if you and somebody else is sitting on London. Now, London, I think, is just somebody you bench right now and you wait for them to sort of straighten it out, because I don't know why they're using these premium picks on players and then not using them as pass catchers. It's bizarre.
Well, they did this year. They picked Bijan and then used him in the passing game. So no, yeah, I'd pick up Drake London, because again, if you're picking up Gabe Davis to stash him, you're not starting him this week, then you might as well just pick up Drake London and just stash him then, because of the talent disparity, and hope that things just get better.
The other thing I would mention is that Drake London was a 5th round pick a couple weeks ago. Gabe Davis was a 7th, 8th round pick a couple weeks ago. Neither player did particularly well in week 1. How much has changed? I think the panic's in the streets on Drake London.
Yeah. Yep.
Buy the dip.
I'm here for it, especially in Dynasty. I'm all here for it. Speaking of Dynasty, though, Here for the Memes, our good friend Here for the Memes is back with another $5 super chat. Thank you so much for the constant weekly support Here for the Memes. But he's got a very interesting question. This is pertaining to some more news from week 1. He says, pick a side in a Dynasty 10 team Superflex full PPR. Start 3 wide receivers: Stephon Diggs or Garrett Wilson and a 2nd round pick. This is very interesting, because this does tie, the Dynasty aspect ties into it very interestingly for Garrett Wilson, because this year, I'm not going to call it a lost season, but it's definitely not what we thought it was going to be, with Aaron Rodgers now having Zach Wilson again for the entire year, or whoever, if they bring in Carson Wentz or whoever it is. It's another maybe mediocre wide receiver 2 season for Garrett Wilson, and not the breakout season that he thought he would have. So from a Dynasty perspective, would you trade away the youth and the upside in Garrett Wilson, add a 2nd to it, and then just go get Stephon Diggs, the veteran elite producer? You're losing some age, but you're getting the production back this year. It's a very intriguing question, and I don't think I'm willing. I think I'm sticking with Garrett Wilson. I see the allure of the production, but from a Dynasty standpoint, I don't think it's going to matter all too much in a large starting lineup requirement, especially when you're starting 3 wide receivers. Like, you might say the production difference between Diggs and Garrett Wilson is maybe 4 or 5 points a game, and that's probably totally the case. But I don't know if that really ultimately makes a massive difference for you in your lineup in terms of whether or not you are actually still a contender or not a contender, So I think I stick with the Dynasty value of Garrett Wilson, and you get the 2nd round pick. You get to keep the pick instead of going for Stephon Diggs.
I had a similar question. I was just basically on Garrett Wilson's outlook this season with Zach Wilson at quarterback, and I pulled up our market share splits app on 4for4, and in the 8 games with Wilson playing, starter snaps. Zach Wilson playing starter snaps. Garrett Wilson averaged 6 targets, 3.8 receptions for 52 yards, no touchdowns. Expected touchdowns were 0.1. So you're looking at like 7.2 fantasy points per game and half PPR. Without Wilson at quarterback, 11 targets, 5.9 receptions, 76 receiving yards. Air yards go from 53.8 to 124.7. 0.44 receiving touchdowns without Zach Wilson at quarterback. Expected touchdowns 0.63 for basically a double his fantasy points of 13.0. So just be prepared for that. I mean, he did get the touchdown. He got the 30-something yards, and that was a weird game, obviously, with Rodgers leaving after 4 snaps. Everybody was kind of shell-shocked.
Right.
Now, like, how much did Zach Wilson learn from Rodgers? Is he significantly better? And will he feed his number 1 guy? I think he'll be better than what he showed last year. And also, Garrett Wilson is in year 2, so he's better. And whenever I get these kinds of questions, as far as my keeper league, I always go to the DLF like consensus rankings to kind of see because I'm not in a dynasty mindset. I'm in a redraft mindset. And, you're losing 6 years of age, 29 to 23. And then maybe this quarterback situation sorts itself out for the Jets pretty soon. Like maybe Rodgers is back next year, or maybe they make another move to improve it. But this season, you're definitely have to be prepared for some bad weeks, because the quarterback play went from future Hall of Famer to Zach Wilson.
Yeah. I almost just wish Zach would just chuck it. Like he would just take on this like Carson Wentz or Ryan Fitzpatrick mentality and just be like, you know what? Screw it. What's the worst that could happen? I get benched again. Oh, well, like that's what I wish that he would just kind of do. And maybe he does kind of bring a little bit of that. And because he learned some of that from Aaron Rodgers of just like, hey man, just trust your wide receiver, just give him a shot, see what happens. And, so I'm keeping Garrett Wilson in the second, or I'm taking that side if you had Stephon Diggs. But
let me ask you this. Would you, if it's a contending year, would you make a different decision?
No, because I don't think it's going to ultimately affect your roster all that much, the difference between Diggs and Garrett Wilson. Because most fantasy matchups are not like, they don't finish within 6, 7, 8 points. If that's the point per game difference between Wilson and Stephon Diggs, like most matchups are 10, 15, 20 points in terms of a difference. And I've made moves like this. Like I posted a video on the DLF channel about making moves like this that are not good dynasty value moves in the hopes of getting better production and contending. And while I still end up contending and doing well, that difference, that one specific trade did not impact or change any of my matchups for the entire year. I would have won all the same matchups I would have won. I would have lost the same matchups I would have lost. And at the end of the year, the way I finished the year was the exact same. I did that 2 years in a row. And then then my team was pretty bad after those 2 years. So I would take Garrett Wilson in a second. But at the end of the day, if you want to go for production, you're contending, I don't think this is a bad move to do. I don't think it's bad to add a second to Garrett Wilson to go get Diggs or Tyreek, or I would say Kupp, but I wouldn't do that for Kupp. But normally I would have. Maybe it's Devontae Adams. I don't know. I would keep Garrett Wilson in the second, though. Great question, though, here for the memes. Thank you. We got to get back. We got way more questions from this. Let's see. So many. In half PPR, would you trade Aaron Jones and Cortland Sutton for Josh Jacobs? And that's a really... I'm going to assume this is rest of season, just redraft rest of season. Because in Dynasty, yes, you're obviously doing this, but this is probably not a Dynasty question. But I think I would do this just for Josh Jacobs. You clear up an extra roster spot by moving away Cortland Sutton. You get somebody who's a little bit healthier right now in Josh Jacobs, a little bit more weekly touch floor upside. I think I'd do this for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I don't think that Sutton's a whole lot right now, unless, I might be discounting him. He just doesn't hold a lot of redraft value. I don't have a lot of confidence in him after the last season and Jerry Jeudy coming back and just sort of what's going on with Denver. I'm very reluctant to trade Aaron Jones. I love him, but this is you're trading away a guy you probably got in the 4th or 5th round for Josh Jacobs, who, if he had a normal offseason, probably is going near the 1-2 turn, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at it like that, like you're getting that sort of upgrade. Obviously, Jones had the big for week 1, but he's also very questionable for week 2. So yeah, I think I would do this.
Yep, I agree. Trenton, to answer this question real quick, in a dynasty league, I'm assuming this is dynasty, but it's a 12-team Superflex half PPR. Give Mac Jones, Bryce Young, get Jalen Hurts. Absolutely. You said that he looked at it but didn't decline it straight away. So you're thinking of adding London to get it. If this is dynasty, I would still be willing to do that to go get Jalen Hurts. You might not have to add an asset like Drake London to go get Hurts if he looked at it and didn't decline. He's on the fence with it already as is. So maybe try to give him something that's not exactly Drake London. to get the deal done, but I would do it with Drake London still in the mix. And if this is redraft, that's even more of a yes.
Can I ask a question? We talked about Puka. Where does the Dynasty community feel Puka ranks now amongst receivers after one game?
Puka rose up pretty quickly. If I were to put where his value would be right now, it would be up in the like Josh Downs, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed kind of area for Dynasty, because he rose up dramatically from where he was. But there's still like the Cooper Kupp's coming back. What's his value after Kupp? He was still a day 3 pick. So there's still all of that kind of stuff, and just the uncertainty of was that a 1 week wonder? But his value definitely rose a lot.
Yeah, I'm looking at DLF's rankings. Josh Downs at 61, Rashee Rice at 59, and Puka at 74. But a couple of the rankers haven't updated since I don't know, the 14th or something.
I think Ryan McDowell has him as a borderline like top 100 one quarterback asset.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Francis, running back needing and thinking of trading Nico for Gus Edwards in a half PPR. His other wide receivers are AJ Brown, Diggs, London, JSN, Flowers. So you may not necessarily need Nico. If you're running back needy, would you be willing to trade away Nico Collins for Gus Edwards?
Yeah, I think this is and you feel free to disagree with me, but I think Gus Edwards has proven that he is a good runner of the football. I have to describe him that way whenever, because he doesn't do a whole lot in the passing game, but I think every season he has averaged at least 5 yards per carry. He tends to do well in the advanced metrics, broken tackles per attempt, yards after contact per attempt. He's now a full year removed from the ACL injury, so he should be back to his normal self. So I look at this backfield like it's going to be a committee. Gus will probably settle into a 10 to 15 carry type role, with Justice Hill getting maybe 5 carries and playing on passing downs or something, but they don't throw it to their running backs a lot. There was talk of that in the preseason, that they were making that more of a priority, but in week 1 we haven't seen it yet, so that might still happen.
Dobbins had like 3 receptions though in the first half before he went down?
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay, so
pretty sure he had 2 or 3.
Good point. So I think with the thing that's throwing me though is that they had Justice Hill in for 2 goal line touchdowns, and they did give Gus Edwards a 2-point conversion short yardage. So I don't know if they're just using what happened in week 1. I wonder if that was just, okay, Dobbins is our number 1, Justice Hill is our number 2, and then Gus is our backup number 3. And then now that this situation has changed, is Justice Hill always sort of destined for a complementary change of pace role, with now Gus Edwards being the primary back? And that would be my guess based on Edwards' track record. And he is really underrated, has not had a chance to have the RB1 job to himself for very long. The Dobbins ACL, he tore his ACL, I believe, right after Dobbins did. So kind of ruined that season for him and that opportunity for him. But this might be his chance to sort of take it. I don't think he's going to ever be a fantasy RB1, because he just doesn't add anything as a receiver, but he's good in the running game.
I have been in the Gus Edwards is one of the best handcuffs in the league camp for about 4 or 5 years now. And it was just super unfortunate whenever Dobbins went down, because I was all aboard the Gus Edwards train that year. And then like 2 weeks later, then he tore his ACL, and I was like, are you freaking serious? But yeah, this whole entire week, I've just been arguing that Gus Edwards is going to be more of the guy than people think. And I think that people just see that Justice Hill had 2 goal line carries, converted both for a touchdown. But he did not look good outside of those 2 touches, those just scoring 2 touchdowns. His 6 other carries went for 4 yards. So meanwhile, Gus Edwards in the same had 8 rush attempts, I believe, for over 30 yards. So I think I would do this for Gus Edwards. I would trade Nico for Gus, because I do think that Gus could present league winning ability, not in the sense like what you said, where he could be like an RB1 out of nowhere, but he could be a guy that could present solid RB2 value that you just found on the waiver wire. And if he becomes that kind of, weekly flex or RB2 guy as bye weeks roll in or more injuries kind of roll in, he could be a guy I think that could propel a lot of teams to the playoffs and potentially to championships with the volume that I think that he will ultimately end up getting. It might be ugly for a week or two, but I think eventually Gus Edwards does separate himself. I think he has all the upside, in my opinion. I don't think Justice has the upside.
And I like Nico. He had a good first week, and I think he's the best receiving option in Houston. The Dalton Schultz experience hasn't paid off yet, so I don't think he's going to garner tons of targets based on what we saw in week 1. But Nico looked good, and I think his downfield works well with CJ Stroud's accuracy downfield. But you are sitting pretty. AJ Brown, Diggs, Zay Flowers, you can start them pretty much every week, and then you're sort of waiting on London and JSN and maybe Jaden Reed to emerge as starters again, or starters, early in their career. And, giving up Nico, if you're RB needy, I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Completely agree. Dollar Bill DDB is asking if Dalvin Cook is worth a flex play in full PPR leagues with how well Breece Hall played. Now they do get the Cowboys this week, so I'm not starting him this week, and I think Breece is just going to continue to take more and more work away from Dalvin Cook because he looked mighty fine. But do you see anything differently?
This is every time I see the word Breece or Breece Hall, I just think to my roster decision in Scott Fishbowl where I benched him because he was going to be so limited in week 1, and he's cranking out 30 yards a carry.
I benched him too in Scott Fish. So
yeah, I'm so disappointed with.
I would have won if I played him
a week ago. I'm so upset with myself. And it was the tight end scoring too that convinced me to start a couple tight ends that I had. Anyway, I wonder what you think about this too. But with Aaron Rodgers out, do the Jets totally change their plan with Breece Hall? I think they were probably thinking, we'll be, whatever 9-4. And we can really be ramping up Breece Hall coming to the playoffs, and because we have designs in the Super Bowl, so we want him healthy at the end of the season. But now they sort of need him to win games, and maybe I should scratch out sort of. I think they need him to win games. Do they accelerate his plan? It wasn't like Dalvin Cook ran really well behind the same offensive line against the same defense. I mean, Breece Hall just exploded. Dalvin Cook was pretty ineffective from a yards per carry standpoint. I do think that this is going to be a run heavy team if they're smart and try to limit Zach Wilson's exposure as much as possible. So both players could be flex worthy, RB2 worthy. But there's only so many touches to go around, and it's interesting that this offensive line was clearly really bad in the preseason. We saw it on Hard Knocks. I don't know if you watched that, but Rodgers was frustrated with the blocking, and they were trying to get that all organized. He came out and got hit on his first 3 dropbacks. So I don't know that he was ever going to survive the season with that many hits. If it was going to continue that way, they seemed like they were lost blocking. So, however, Breece Hall is cranking out 30 yards a carry. So,
it does.
Actually, it was 15, right? Or 12 or 15. But his first 3 carries went for 120 yards or something. So, I think that they do start to ramp him up faster, but they might just decide, he's too important for our future. Let's not, this is probably not a season where we're going to make the playoffs, but they might go that route, but it's just, they have to shift their whole paradigm in terms of how their strategy for how they're attacking the season, given that they lost Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the beginning of the year last year as kind of a formula for what the Jets could be looking at. Cause when Breece Hall was playing weeks 1 through 6, they went 4-2 during that whole entire stretch. And every single week he had more rush attempts. He had 6, then 7, then 8, then 17, 18, 20. Every single week got more and more touches. And that whole entire time frame, he was getting good receiving volume as well. And also during that stretch, Michael Carter was still, I wouldn't say well into the offense, but he was getting a solid amount of touches. He was averaging 10 to 12 touches per game during that stretch with Breece Hall just going absolutely bananas. And even the game that he got hurt in, they still won that game because he scored a touchdown before he tore his ACL. So I think that to me is kind of he kind of got thrown into the same situation that he had been in last year as a rookie. And I just don't know how Breece Hall is not more and more part of the game plan as the season progresses. Maybe, of course, they take him a little bit slower for the first couple of weeks here as they try to adjust to an offense without Aaron Rodgers that they planned for all year long. But I think as the more and more they look at it, and the more and more they think we got to win games, we got to get to the playoffs, I think a lot of those routes and avenues lead towards Breece Hall getting more and more touches because he is the second best, if not the best player on that offense, hands down. And that's going to be bad for Dalvin Cook. Now, if you're looking at this week specifically, it might still be all right because Cook might still get good enough touches, but they played Dallas. I'm not playing Dalvin Cook this week as a flex against Dallas after what they did to the Giants last week. First game without Aaron Rodgers, I'm not doing it. So we got another super chat though. Jeff's out here with another $5 super chat. Jeff, thank you so much. He said that he went hero running back. He took John Paulsen's hero over here, Aaron Jones. We love Aaron Jones. His RB2 is Cam Akers. But if Aaron Jones sits, Akers is now his RB1. Who should he go with as his RB2? You're looking at Chuba, Tyjae Spears, Sean Tucker, Deion Jackson. All very disgusting options here for the week. But he's got to pick one of those guys as his RB2 if Aaron Jones does sit. And I mean, I know you're pulling up your rankings. I don't know how quickly you.
I don't think I have to for this one. I mean, I would stick with Akers, but definitely the barf emoji fits.
Akers is his one, so then he's got to pick a 2 out of these 4.
Well, he says if Jones sits, then I got to. Oh, I gotcha. So Akers is his gross 2. Okay, so yeah.
So we need to pick one this week between Chuba, Spears, Tucker, and Deion Jackson.
I thought he was trying to decide between Akers and one of these guys. Chuba had. So you're just looking for touches. None of these guys stand out to me as like fantastic talents. Maybe you have a different opinion, Addison. Nope. But Chuba had 11 touches. Mm-hmm. So last week in a game where they trailed the whole way. So I think he's, 9 of them were rushes. He ran the ball well, 6.7. I think Chuba has been really, I think, the clear RB2 there and one of the last drafted clear upside RB2s. Maybe just because he's been in the league for a while and hasn't lit it on fire, but he's a good handcuff because now he's getting 11 touches. So that's the one that jumps out to me. Spears played a lot, but didn't get many touches. Derrick Henry is going to continue to dominate that backfield. Yeah, Tucker's okay as a stash. Deion Jackson, I think only Jackson if Zach Moss sits. If Zach Moss is back, I think he's probably the RB1 there, and Jackson's just in a complimentary role. But you could I think it would go Chuba or Jackson because he at least will be involved and probably get a few touches.
Yeah, I think Jackson might be the play here. I actually am in on Zach Moss this week, but Jackson at least I think has the receiving ability there also they play Houston. So if there's any sort of week where the Colts run game could really just dominate, it could be this week against the Texans where they just, they don't have to throw a bunch because they're just dominating on the ground, and both Zach Moss and Deion Jackson could do well. And if Jackson's getting 3, 4, 5 receptions out of that, and it is just half PPR, not a full PPR, but that's still going to help you out a little bit. Chuba, wasn't a lot of his touches in garbage time though.
Well,
I was trying to see if I could find that real quick, but because I know Roschon had a lot of touches, but a lot of that was in garbage time at the end of the game because the game was already over. But I do agree it's between Chuba and Jackson. I might lean Jackson just for, I think, I shouldn't say more, but more projected safety in terms of touches. as well as upside. If in fact Indy does kind of not crush Houston, but just kind of dominate them on the running game.
So I pulled up the game log just for Chuba, just because I didn't know either. But he had 3 touches on their first drive.
Oh, okay.
All carries. He had another catch in the second quarter, another run in the second quarter. So he had 5 touches before halftime. I think he's like they're rotating him in. So just it wasn't garbage time stuff. I think for him.
Good. I still think I'd choose Jackson. Yeah, but Chuba.
He was so bad. He was so ineffective last week. Jackson.
Well, that's the funny part because like we knew that he was ineffective. You looked at the games last year when he was playing for Jonathan Taylor. Dude's getting like 12 carries and only running for 30 yards. Like we knew he's not a good runner in between the tackles, but that may or may not matter again, like I said, because it's Houston. But
yeah,
it's between those two.
I would definitely say Jackson if Moss sits. I mean, that's a clear he's going to get 15 touches, but I think I would go with Chuba. If Moss plays,
I'd go Chuba.
You don't have to agree with me.
I agree with you. All right. Dave is asking if he should trade away Ramondre for Bigsby, a first, second, and Terrace Marshall in a 12-man PPR. Already has Pollard, Mixon, ETN, and he can win now. I'm not moving Ramondre for that. The first is interesting, but I don't think I'm moving. Like, first, Bigsby, interesting. Marshall's nothing. The second's If you could condense the other assets, like the second and Marshall, and even condense Bigsby into another first, then I would probably go for it. But it's just kind of like you're really a lot of this is really stemming on that 2025 pick that's 2 years away, whereas you could just have Ramondre right now.
I would note that Terrace Marshall, he had I think
he was second on the team in targets. Am I right in that?
Last year?
No, week one.
Week one. He played 90-something% of the snaps. DJ Chark was out. But Marshall, just the thing I note with him whenever his name comes up is that he was highly regarded by Matt Harmon, reception perceptions, route running in college, had a really, really bad rookie year, and then started to come on late last year. He had, a 3 for 70. Well, he had a 3. Wait a second here. He had last year, week 8, 4 for 87 against Atlanta, 3 for 53 and 1 against Cincinnati back-to-back games, 1 for 43 against Atlanta, 3 for 76 against Baltimore. That's a 4-game run there. Pretty solid. And then towards the end of the year, 3 for 51 against Pittsburgh, 2 for 55 against Detroit. I mean, they didn't have a whole lot of, they had DJ Moore, and that was pretty much it, but he was playing 90% of the snaps. And I always, when Matt's really high on somebody, I mean, Sky Moore was another one coming out of college. Mm-hmm. I just kind of note that and put them in a file and like, okay, maybe it's kind of coming together, because if they showed the good route running ability in college, it should translate to the NFL eventually. Because he's hit on so many over the years that have turned into superstars, like Tyreek Hill going in the 5th round the year before he totally blew up. Tyler Lockett, the list goes on and on with that. So that's just something I don't. You said that Terrace Marshall's nothing. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. But he's not. I'm sure he doesn't hold a lot of value right now. No. But he did play. He did play a lot down the stretch last year, and he played 90% plus of the snaps last week. And I don't think DJ Chark is like an insurmountable obstacle either. But I'm interested to see how much he plays Marshall when Chark returns, because they just don't have a whole lot at receiver right now.
Right. I still think he's nothing. I'm going to rapid fire like 3 dynasty questions real quick. And then we had a couple start sits that are really interesting. Bruce is asking Chase Brown, hold or cut in dynasty after being a healthy scratch. You're holding on to Chase Brown. Chris Evans is hurt, I believe, right? So that even makes it more interesting.
Well, Travion Williams is back, so I think he was the plan.
We're talking about Terrace Marshall being nothing. Travion Williams.
Oh, the team liked him a lot. Said he was going to look like he was going to be the number 2 before that ankle injury. So I'm just pointing that out.
I'll see what happens this week because Chris Evans does have that hamstring injury. He's been missing practice this week. But no, you're not cutting Chase Brown in Dynasty. Legend of Krakatoa is asking if you would trade Treylon Burks to get a first, and I would take the first. I'd still believe in the talent, but the first is just so much nicer and a more insulated value asset in Dynasty to have. Then you're not having to play the games with if Burks is actually good or not. Not that if he's good or not, but like, does he have the opportunity? What can he do with it in the Titans offense with DeAndre Hopkins as the alpha? Damian Pierce or a first? I'm taking a first. I'm surprised you can still get a first after week 1, honestly, with the way people react, because his usage was terrible in week 1. But I've been taking a first over Damian Pierce for about 2 years now. He's only been in the league for 2 years, but I've been taking that first for 2 years over Damian Pierce. I think that was. Oh, the other one in here. How are we valuing George Pickens in Dynasty? I would take a first for him as well. You said that the DLF analyzer values him around 2 seconds. I would keep George Pickens over that. But if you can get a 24 first for him, just a random first that could have the potential. If it's mid first, that's fine. And you could turn Pickens back into like Xavier Worthy or Mika Ibuka or one of the top 3 running backs in next year's class if Travion still does well and Braylon Allen looks okay and Raheem Sanders looks great. So there's a lot of good prospects next year, especially in a 10-team Superflex where if you're able to get a top 6 or 7 pick for Pickens, I would do that. But I would keep him for over 2 seconds, though. So those were the rapid fire dynasty real quick. Now, the interesting start sits. This is the first one. Jamal Williams or Zach Moss in a non-PPR league. Just full standard, which is perfect for both of these running backs. But I think I'm taking Jamal Williams still. I know we were talking about, and I like Zach Moss this week, but at the end of the day, it's still Zach Moss. Jamal Williams at least has more touch upside, more known with him. And if he could fall into the end zone, then I still like that. And especially against Carolina too. It works out pretty well. Is that where you're going with?
Yeah. And thank you for giving your take first, because it allows me to pull up my rankings so I can discuss them intelligently, not try to vamp as I'm doing that. Definitely Williams. As I pulled it up, I was thinking, Atlanta really killed Carolina in the running game last week, and full standard, Jamal likely to score a touchdown or the likeliest of anybody in that backfield. Zach Moss is intriguing in theory. And we think that he'll have the workload if he's back, but we don't know it like we know Jamal Williams will have the workload. So there's definitely a certainty with Williams that you're not getting with Moss. It's a nice matchup. Moss could go out there and have another 100-yard game against the Texans like he did late last year, but we're not even sure that's how the team values him or is planning to utilize him if he's healthy. And then the other issue with him is that Anthony Richardson could very well steal, all the goal line carries as well. So yeah, I would definitely go with Jamal Williams for safety, and he's got a bit of upside as well.
Yep. Perfect agreement. John has 2 start sit questions, both in a half PPR. He's going with Gabe Davis versus Zay Jones. That's the first decision. And then the other one is tight end, David Njoku or Dalton Kincaid. And he says that he needs more upside in the latter. So Gabe Davis and Zay Jones, we can address that one first. I would probably play Gabe Davis for this one. I know Zay had the touchdown, looked pretty solid, and was playing in 2 wide receiver sets over Christian Kirk, but I'd probably go with Gabe Davis. And then Njoku or Kincaid, I would probably play Kincaid, both for the upside and for potential higher floor of usage and targets.
Yeah, I don't know how useful this will be because I'm going to contradict Addison with Zay Jones. Dang. I think he's just been undervalued all offseason. I had him ranked about 20 spots ahead of his ADP all summer. So I have a lot of Zay Jones. You could tell from the preseason that he was going to be in on 2 wide receiver sets. Christian Kirk was being kind of his roles being minimized a little bit. He played 60% of the snaps. Now that might change this week, as Daigle noted on the pod. Playing against Kansas City, they're probably going to have to throw the ball more and probably want to get Christian Kirk on the field and maybe his snaps increase. But it doesn't matter because Zay Jones is a 80-90% snap guy every week. He's got a great rapport with Trevor Lawrence, who trusts him. I think he performed as a wide receiver 2, 3 all of last year. So I definitely trust him more than I do Gabe Davis, although Gabe Davis obviously has a ton of upside. He now has 17 touchdowns in his last 25 games, not scoring a touchdown last week. As for the Njoku Kincaid question, I mean, I have, I probably the Kincaid has more. Did you say Kincaid? Because I think they probably have
Kincaid.
I would say more upside. But what you're expecting out of your tight end is maybe a touchdown, and you're hoping for 40 yards and a touchdown out of these tight end 2s that we've got. I've got Njoku at 14, Kincaid at 16, but if they're separated by 0.2 points. If you're looking for upside, I'd probably go with Josh Allen and that passing attack for the Bills.
There we go. Hopefully that helped John. And I feel like when it comes to starts to decision ties, go with Paulsen's answer. Zay Jones and Dalton Kincaid. I've seen a couple Joshua Kelley questions in here now. D said, thank you for the Swift recommendation. So I hope everybody started DeAndre Swift last night with the news of Kenneth Gainwell being out. That was phenomenal. Can't wait for him to get 4 touches next week when Gainwell's back. It's going to be great. But he's asking in a half PPR, DJ Moore, Jahan Dotson, or Joshua Kelley if Austin Eckler is out with injury. I put out a tweet that kind of got hit on a little bit on Twitter that I don't like Joshua Kelley this week. Even if Austin Eckler is out, because they play the Titans on the road, and that is not a great matchup for running backs. Now, of course, the Chargers offensive line seems to be like the strongest unit in their entire team. So that could be a positive for them to give Kelley more space to work with before contact. But if he doesn't score, I don't know really what his upside is ultimately. And my tweet said that I think that you should have better options. Given that it's week 2, we don't really have many injuries right now, and don't have any bye weeks to consider, that you should probably still have better options considering the team that you drafted or options that you have off of waiver wire still, like Puka or anything like that. So from all of that, my answer for this would be Jahan Dotson this week. I don't know if you.
I think Dotson is a solid play. He's got the same cornerback matchup likely that Jacoby Myers crushed in
hopefully
last week. I think it's still a receiver this is still half PPR receiver versus running back. And if Eckler is out, I would go with Kelley because of the touch floor. And even if he's not running the ball terribly well, he did run 20 routes last week. Austin Eckler ran 24. So you could really see Kelley in a 30 snap or 30 route type role. And I think he's a capable pass catcher as well. So I think I would go with Kelley.
Then I'm assuming you're taking Kelley over Zach Moss.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at the flex rankings, Dotson and DJ Moore are sort of in the same range as Zach Moss, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill type players. And I would have Kelley well above that. I probably would have him in the top 20 just from a touch floor standpoint. And even if it's a bad matchup against Tennessee, there's still going to be a lot of, let's say he does 15 carries for 3 yards a carry, that's 45 yards. And maybe he adds 3 or 4 receptions, in a game where they have to throw the ball more. He stumbles into the end zone. You got yourself a pretty good fantasy day.
Right. Yeah. I'm not super anti Josh Kelley. I just think that it would be nicer to have him with bye weeks involved where you have fewer options, I think, because I still think that you have better options than Joshua Kelley, but he is a volume play. And there aren't many running backs that you can still say would be a volume play if Austin Eckler was out, but I'm hesitant.
And again, we don't know exactly how the Colts are going to use Zach Moss. We can't just assume. We think that they're going to use him like they did late last year, but we can't assume that.
I'm hopeful. Another start sit PPR pick 1. Raheem Mostert, Brian Robinson, Jahan Dotson, Jamal Williams, Puka, or Zay Jones. You got to pick one out of all of those guys. Tell me why I shouldn't just pick Puka in a PPR league. I know they play the Niners, but they're probably going to have to throw a ton. And the Steelers' weapons, while it was spread out between A-Rob and Calvin Austin and Pickens and Deontay before he got hurt, there was still at least receiving fantasy points to be had from the Steelers wide receiver room last week. So if that it gets condensed down to more Puka and or Tutu, I think I'm taking Puka in a full PPR in this one. Go back to the well. You like Zay Jones. Dotson.
I do like Zay Jones, but Jamal Williams and Brian Robinson's touch floor, Raheem Mostert's touch floor are appealing. I'm double checking, make sure I got PPR flex pulled up. Yeah, I mean Mostert's coming in first, Jamal Williams, and then Brian Robinson, and then Zay Jones. So
we were just not accounting for Puka to have 15 receptions again.
Yeah, I mean Puka is in the, I've got him ranked as a wide receiver 3. I'm a little bit conservative when it comes to rookies that have these huge first weeks. I mean, I think Seattle just was blindsided by this, and San Francisco is a much better defense and better coaching staff, and will be ready, I think, to deal with him. Now, he might still produce, but I think they'll have a plan. Plus, he's got a hamstring injury or something. He's questionable in our rankings, oblique injury. So that's just something to keep an eye on.
All right. Well, John, I know it's 1:05. I don't know how much longer we can go.
Well, as I said last week, I will stick around as long as there's super chats. I know you might want to stick around to answer some more questions, but any other super chats out there, I'll be happy to chime in on.
While we wait we'll give it another minute, but we'll answer one more because I think this is kind of interesting because it involves a little bit of strategy in the redraft aspect. Mark is asking Gabe Davis or Kadarius Toney. He says that his score projections are close, but his opponent has Josh Allen. So he's thinking that if he plays Gabe Davis and Gabe Davis does well because Josh Allen is then doing well, that he kind of mitigates some of Josh Allen's upside. Now that only works if a lot of fantasy points from Josh Allen go to Gabe Davis and Davis doesn't put up a goose egg and all of it goes to Kincaid or Diggs. But does that kind of strategy come into play when you're making start-sit decisions, or are you just throwing out the best player that you have possible? And if that is it Gabe Davis or is it Kadarius Toney this week?
I usually would not worry about who the opposing team's quarterback is when making a roster decision. In this particular situation, my projections aren't particularly close. I have Gabe Davis well ahead of Kadarius Toney. In our flex rankings, Kadarius had such a bad week 1. He might bounce back, but he's still playing very limited snaps. I'd like to see him getting 40, 50, 60% of the snaps before I'm going to deploy him as a starter. He's always been a very high yards per route run guy, both with the Giants and with the Chiefs last year, but he's just has not played a whole lot of snaps consistently or at all. It's been very sporadic. So I just don't trust that he's going to be on the field to have enough fantasy points. He could be one of those guys that goes out there, plays 10 snaps and has 2 touchdowns. But I think, as Daigle mentioned, Gabe Davis has a good, nice matchup with the Raiders this week, a lot of zone. He tends to thrive in that. And we're definitely expecting a bounce back game from Josh Allen. So I do think that Davis is the better play.
I have been wondering if there's some sort of like the squeaky wheel Kadarius Toney narrative where he's had such a bad game. Mahomes was hyping him up and Coach Reed was hyping him up, all this kind of stuff where I want, and because that's such a, it's like a 50-51 over under with the Jaguars this week, that if maybe that there is an opportunity for a shootout, and if they want to get Kadarius Toney kind of involved in his confidence back up, if they just kind of, force feed a quick few touches early on in the game and builds up his confidence, he actually catches them. Then I wonder if that could kind of lead towards some sort of a breakout game for Kadarius Toney. But like you said, like I feel like I'm at the point with you where I need to see something first. I need to see more snaps, the routes run per snap, and the target rate and the yards rate per route run are fantastic. But when you're only doing that on, a dozen routes a game like that, at a certain point, we have to stop rewarding him for that. And just look at him for the player that he is now. And until that actually changes, I think he is going to sit on my bench, and Gabe Davis would be the play for me here as well. We did get a $5 super chat though, again from Jeff. Jeff is the man here. Thank you so much for all your support today, Jeff, for all the super chats. But he's asking, given the nightmare last week, are you starting Daniel Jones with little worry over guys like Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Mac Jones? How would you be looking at Daniel Jones after the complete train wreck that was Monday night, or what was that? Sunday Night Football?
Yeah, I would start him. You know, that game does give you a little bit of pause that they just weren't even competitive. But this is definitely a bounce back situation in the dome against the Cardinals, who it's questionable whether or not. I think the team is like based on what they did last week against Washington. They are trying to win the players. The coaching staff may or may not be. The front office probably isn't. So they're probably relieved that the Cardinals lost. But Jones, I think this is a good spot for him. He's going to get there with his rushing. They're going to run a lot still with him, and we're going to get this passing game going, I think, this week. Darren Waller looks like he's going to play a little bit of hamstring tweak, but he should be okay. And, you know, they still have a decent couple of outside receivers, Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton. And, I think this is should be a lot better result for a normal result for Daniel Jones after last week's debacle.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good week for a bounce back, like you said, against Arizona, and especially when you're comparing him to some of these other guys. I think, Stafford gets the Niners. We kind of talked about that a little bit with Puka. Mac Jones is who he is right now, and plays Miami. Derek Carr, I think, would be if I had to pick between those three guys, Derek Carr would be my play this week against Carolina. But when you're comparing Derek Carr then to Daniel Jones, I just feel Daniel Jones just has so much more upside that he can get there both on the ground and through the air against the Cardinals defense, with, Darren Waller seeing like a 90% target share, and then the other 10% going to the hodgepodge of guys and Hodgins and Slayton and Saquon, all that other kind of stuff.
This is an interesting question because this is the Daniel Jones, the rushing floor that he provides versus 3 pocket passers that don't really run. So, the chances of you getting a 30-point game out of Daniel Jones are higher than the Carr, Jones, or Stafford. So that's part of it. And he also has a higher floor because he's probably going to get his 40, 50 yards rushing as well. So
right.
It's an interesting Konami code thing that we've been gravitating towards the last 5 or 10 years.
Francis hit us with another $2 super chat here. He was the one who was asking about trading Nico for Gus Edwards. He said, would you still make that trade, or because he's running back needy, would you drop Jaden Reed for Jerome Ford and then keep Nico Collins and address the running back position that way?
I'm wondering did something happen to Nick Chubb?
Like while we were talking? I haven't seen any fantasy
I don't see anything.
Life alerts come up.
Yeah. Ford's just kind of the change of pace guy in Cleveland. I wouldn't try to trust him like I would. Expectations are much lower for Ford than they are for Gus Edwards, I think, on a weekly basis. I wouldn't want to really cut Jaden Reed either. He looks pretty good.
Right. I definitely think that's the other aspect of this. I don't want to cut Jaden Reed, and I want Gus Edwards over Jerome Ford. Those are kind of the two things that are, kind of making this decision for me. And I mean, if you look, like I had asked about Chuba's touches and stuff, like when they came in, if they came in garbage time, like you want to talk about garbage time touches. If you just look at the box score and you see that Jerome Ford had 15 carries, now they only went for 36 yards, but he had 15 carries this past week. You might say, oh, wow, he's getting actively involved, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that was in the garbage time of the game. The fact that they were already winning in such a bad weather condition game.
They don't want to risk Chubb.
Chubb getting hurt. No, why just throw Jerome Ford out there. Let him see what he can do, returning from the injury and stuff. And it wasn't all that effective. And he also lost a fumble. So I want Gus over Jerome Ford, and I don't want to drop Jaden Reed. And I would let Nico Collins go at the expense of getting Gus. So there we have it.
All right.
That would be it. We appreciate you guys joining us for the past hour, a little over an hour or so. We're going to be doing this every single Friday at noon Eastern time. So if you need some questions, some start sit questions We have that every single Friday. You can also drop a comment in this video on the replay on the DLF side. I'll be answering it. I believe Sal answers on the 444 side as well too. So if you had a question, we didn't get to it today, you can definitely ask it in the comments on either side of the stream here, DLF or 444, and get your question answered, or reach out to us on Twitter as well. We can try and do that too. But yeah, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us this Friday afternoon. Hope that you guys have a great week too. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next Friday. See you.